out this incredibly awesome music to bring you some incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
Well, I had second thoughts on that. It was going to be cool, but it didn't work out that way, did it? It's Samuel Trapp. This is Damn Radio. We're coming to you live from the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. Here we are. And I've had some I don't know, I'm trying to decide. Even now, I've already made my decision, but I'm having second thoughts. I've got two topics I wanted to get into tonight, both of which interest me a great deal, neither of which do I think I can finish in one sitting. And so either way, it doesn't matter because I'm going to get into it anyway. If you feel like phoning in and joining, you can do so at 573-746-8020. And you can email me at live@damradio.com or samuelt@internationalflavor.com. And either way, I'd be happy to get your thoughts. I was listening with interest to my brother's show and actually brought up a couple of other thought processes for me. And I think that my original decision for today is where I am going to go. And in keeping with that, what I thought I would do would be to give you a whole bit of a background and an acronym glossary before we get started. So for tonight's purposes, well, for all purposes, you probably know these things because they might be coming to a theater near you for consideration. So the AML that I speak of tonight is anti-money laundering. Okay, these are rules to detect and stop illicit finance. The Bank for International Settlements is the central bankers' coordinated body. The BSA is the Bank Secrecy Act, and it's U.S. anti-money laundering statute. That's a family, Banking Secrecy Act. CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency, state-issued digital money. Okay, and we're going to be talking about digital money tonight, and we're going to be talking about what's called the Genius Act. Everybody knows what a CEO, CFO is, Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer. The Clarity Act, it's a proposed act, follow-up bill. Some banks want to tighten what is they refer to as stablecoin reward loopholes. FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, bank supervisor and insurer. Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. That's a Treasury Anti-Money Laundering Bureau enforcement. FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee. Federal policy body, which controls T-bill markets. The Genius Act. Yeah, great. This is what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, some genius came up with this one, and this is it's actually true. You know, I really this is no dummy came up with this. Okay, guiding and establishing national innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act. Okay. And notice that word stable coins. We're going to come back to that. Okay. But that is the Genius Act. KYC, Know Your Customer Identity Checks in Finance. MiCAR, Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, which is the EU's framework for something similar. NCUA, National Credit Union Administration, Credit Union Regulator. OCC, Officer of the Comptroller of the Currency, which is a national bank supervisor. OFAC, Office of Foreign Asset Control, Treasury Sanctions Office. PAC, Political Action Committee, we all know that one. They raise and spend money to influence elections. SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, market regulator. SNI, Securities and Investments, Open Secrets Donor Industry Category. Okay, this is Securities and Investments is a they keep track of donors in the industry, and they're one of the big ones. SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, who's the FTX founder, was sentenced in March of 2024 to, I believe, 25 years. A T-bill is a U.S. Treasury bill, short long-term government IOU. And the TRM Lab, blockchain analytics firm, referenced by CoinDesk, reference licit used stats. Okay? So where we're going to go today started with a couple of, for me, running into YouTube videos, news stories online, and points of view about this Genius Act, which was passed in July. And we'll get a little more detail on that. And so a couple of weeks ago, and you may have heard me talk about it a little bit before in some of my prior programs, there was a Eastern Economic Forum, EEF, held in Vladivostok, Russia, Far East, attended by Vladimir Putin, attended by many economists from around the world, lots and lots of countries. Very big forum, very big group of people. And now the translations and the other things are starting to come out. This is something I would have liked to go to, and so I did watch some of them, but apparently I didn't put the emphasis or listen to the right couple. And one in particular got my attention late last night while I was, perusing things that I should have read. And so I spent a little bit of time going through this because this Genius Act, and I've always felt this way before I researched it, but after researching it, I feel even more strongly, okay? And you can disagree. I get that. I think that you're either going to take a big plus from it or a big minus. That you're either going to be... There are many schools of thought, but the two big ones are going to be either this was put into place to spy on the Americans, or it was put into effect to maintain hegemony and keep the next step of the U.S. dollar going, which is where I'm going to go today. But I'm going to try to talk about all of those points of view on this particular program. And if you're a financial god, more power to you. I love it. I have an economics background from college and from life, but I don't claim to be God's gift to the planet on regulation or any of those other things. I just see a much bigger picture. And so and the former lawyer in me still knows how to ask a question or two and doubts everything in the first place. So tonight's program isn't about crypto as an investment or about the latest, shiny new app on your telephone. It's about control, because that's what I believe this is all about. And that is the thread that is run through the American financial system in the background that I wish I had known more about when I was a kid, because I would have acted accordingly. And maybe I can help you figure some things out on your own, or at least give you food for thought to think about some, because that is the thread that runs from the 1930s gold grab, which really occurred, through the 1971 Nixon shocker, to the brand new law signed this past summer, the so-called Genius Act. That's a great acronym, isn't it? That's the actual acronym. And it's the Genius Act of 2025. Washington is dressing this up in all kinds of friendly language for you. They get to call them stablecoins. Notice notice the virtue word right in the beginning, stable. This is how the Sam Bankman-Frieds of the world scared everybody because they wouldn't created this thing. Now, I think he was a criminal, but he's also a patsy. They let him do this, and they knew what was going on when he was doing it, is what I think. And they have, every change needs a fall guy, and this is the fall guy. Now, I'm not saying he's a good person, not remotely. I think he took his share of money, robbed it, so did other people that worked with him. But don't tell me that the people didn't know it while it was going on, and many at the top already saw it, including people in government that, profited from it or figured things out from it. So I got a lot to talk about on that end myself, but I'm going to try to refrain from it because that isn't the point of tonight's show either. And they get to call it stable coins because that's what they've decided to call it. Because if you call something often enough, maybe people will start to believe it. That oh geez, we got a Bitcoin. We got a what was the one that Friedman had, WTX or something like that? I can't remember. But this one's stable. It's stable. Why is it stable? Well, we're going to get into that. Because we control it. Well, who's the we? That's the question. But the real question isn't stability of this coin. It's who gets to hold the switch. As usual, from the 30s, from Bretton Woods, from all of those things, we get to review that and who's holding the switch now. So, if you believe a common thread, you believe that Donald Trump is the genius behind all this. He isn't the genius that came up with the bill, but he signed it. He isn't the impetus behind this. There's been a ton of funding to get this done, and we're going to talk about why. But here's what we're going to unpack tonight. We're going to unpack what the law really says. I've got it. I can read it for you line by line, and I got through quite a bit of it, but I must admit it was a quick read. And then there was an interesting in Vladivostok, which I already brought up, okay? There were several warnings from over there about what's really going on. One of them was from an economist by the name of Anton Kubyakov. I almost switched to Russian there. No doubt the emphasis is on the last one, so I assume it's probably Kubyakov. But it doesn't matter. Anton Kubyakov just alleged in Vladivostok. He gave a warning, and I'm going to read you an excerpt from his speech. His warning that the U.S. is going to drive everyone into the crypto cloud and then do what they've done before, devalue it, steal your money to reduce U.S. debt. Now, this should be scary, when you look through it. So pay attention to that. This is a replay of the 1930s confiscation of gold by the U.S. government, which nobody talks about, and the 1971 gold window closure where the U.S. devalued gold twice, quickly. Not in huge amounts, but they devalued it. The one they did in the 30s when they took everybody, that devalued it 41% on the day it happened. And our government is guilty of this, okay? And then we're going to get into what's really behind all of this. Now, I believe, and this is me, especially after my research into this, I believe sanctions are not an afterthought in this scam. Well, I shouldn't call it a scam. It's not. Depending on how you look at it, it could be really good for a lot of things, really bad for a lot of other things. And if you like the things that are good, then you don't think it's going to be a bad deal. If you like the things that are bad, if you think the things that are bad, then you're going to think the opposite. Okay, so keep track of that. Sanctions are not an afterthought to the genius. They are actually built into the code of the system. That means you switch on you flip something on. It's not 19, 20, 21 packages of sanctions. It's whoosh, you're done. The end, we shut you off. We turned you off. Why? Because a regulator in Washington, D.C. said so. The end. Have a nice day. So if you're not paying attention, and if you don't know anything about this, well, you're going to be the one left holding the bag again while your gold gets devalued and everything gets devalued, especially if you're holding crypto, because what they've done, it's pretty creative, and I applaud them for it in some respects. But then again, in another way, it's like, well, here we go again. Not that I was around for either of the. I was around in the 70s, but I wasn't paying attention. What was I, 7? Who knows? With my little piggy bank, maybe I should have kept that piggy bank. Could have been worth something by now. So before we get to the Genius, well, you know what? I'm going to read the Genius Act and what it entails first, and then after we have that backdrop, then I'm going to go to Anton Kubiakov and what he is saying to us. Okay? So let's first let me make sure I have that through here in my little bag of tricks, yeah? Make sure it shows up, which I believe it shall. True. Why is this son of a nutcracker? Well, I guess I'm going to have to ensure that it's me in order to get to the mail. Well, JR might help me out if I didn't. Nope, I got it. All is well. But I don't see my mail. For some reason, it didn't show up. Maybe somebody dragged it over to my thing. Anyway, I'll find it anyway. It doesn't matter. Let's get to where we are on this Genius Act and what it really does. The Genius Act of 2025 creates a new category of money. Payment stablecoins. Remember, they won't call this cryptocurrency. They won't call it anything like that. They want you to call this stable coin, so you get put through your head that because it's controlled by whoever controls it in the background, you won't say the U.S. government, that whoever controls this deal, well, of course, they have your best interests at heart. This is stable coin. We're not going to get Sam Bankman-Fried in here. We are going to have everything necessary to make sure that your money is protected, right? Or that the stealing only goes on at the highest levels, which you can't control anyway. Right? And that's exactly what we're building here, okay? Says the naysayer, Sam. It gives 4 agencies the top billing. And who are they? The Federal Reserve Board. Gee, there's a surprise. The OCC, Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. The FDIC, who insures your bank deposits. And the National Credit Union Association for credit unions, right? These are your gatekeepers. So you can't go outside of here, right? So the facts are as follows. If you issue, after this act started, you can't be a Sam Bankman-Fried and not have something that isn't as follows, okay? If you issue a U.S. dollar, here's the keyword, stable coin, without permission, you need permission of these 4, you can face a civil penalty of $100,000 per day. That is not hyperbole. That is actually in the bill, okay? If you become one of the magically approved issuers, you are forced into monthly reporting and CEO, CFO certification, so you don't end up like Sam Bankman-Fried, or the funds don't end up like being Sam Bankman-Frieded with all kinds of properties in different parts of the world, but you're in prison, okay? Those certifications are tied to criminal penalties under 18 U.S.C. 1350, so you give a false CEO, CFO certification, well, there you go. You're going to prison. So in plain English, if your CEO or CFO signs off on the numbers the regulators decide are misleading, they face criminal charges, right? Here's another fact. The act forces issuers to comply with what's called the Bank Secrecy Act, where there is KYC, Know Your Customers, and AML, anti-money laundering, live. And this is crucial. The law explicitly mentions sanctions compliance. Hold that later, okay? Because here's where I believe the kicker is. Meaning, if the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets and Control, the OFAC, says a wallet address is blocked, that is automatically enforced at the issuer level. So there won't be any discussion of sanctions and how to get around. If you're in this new Bretton Woods structure, these sanctions are going to automatically be able to take place against individuals, governments, anybody connected to the system. Okay? So those are facts. There's been a little bit of commentary about it. I listened to several different discussions about it on different platforms, and I watched a couple-hour debate between a couple of economists on it. I watched another 40-minute one in Russian, and more just to get different points of view on what these people think. But I'd have to say that Putin spoke at the Eastern Economic Forum too, but he didn't really go into too much of this. His was a much more macro, higher level review of things and their focus on heading east. The Economist, this Anton Kubyakov, was quite a bit more direct and forceful in what he had to say. So I'm going to read you a segment of what he said. But from my point of view, not a bit of this has anything to do with innovation in the slightest. This is a new control framework. In fact, a harsher control framework disguised as modernization. Penalties, certifications, compliance. This is Washington taking the part of crypto that was the most threatening to them, not to Americans, but to themselves, and wrapping it back under their thumbs. It's not about freeing markets. It's about fencing the markets in so they can continue to control them. I'm going to get further to what I think about this, but think about U.S. debt. Okay, let's talk about U.S. debt, and I've said this on this show quite a few times before. The U.S. debt has allowed the United States to have unprecedented growth, huge amounts of growth. And how do we continue the trend? Okay, we continue the trend through colonization. We move to another place. There was an article today about Donald Trump saying he wants to take back Bagram Air Force Base, or whatever it was, and the Afghanis saying, Taliban in Afghanistan is going, nope, not happening. And then Trump saying, well, yes, it will. I'm going to get that Bagram back. It's ours. Not anymore, according to them. I don't really care the outcome of it. It's just a question. People, that colonization little effort didn't work. But what do? We go to a new place. We install a couple of military bases. We overthrow or support the overthrow of the current government, put one in that's friendly to us, and then put in a military base, move over U.S.-based contractors, U.S.-based companies, that grow their own businesses and make huge amounts of money. And they do a lot of it on the government nickel because the government is funding these new things. And how does that happen? Through U.S. debt. And then we sell that debt, and then we steal the resources. No, not steal. We buy for an incredibly low price, especially because we are the colonizer. And then we move on to the next place. And that's our history for the last 100 years. You don't have to believe that. I don't care if you believe it or not, but that's the way I see it. That's the way a lot of the world sees it. That's the way I see Ukraine right now. Okay? Only that was a failed gig because we got somebody that wasn't a backwoods, fifth instead of a third world country, a fifth world country to go fight. You go somebody who actually has a military that can stand up for themselves and will stand up for themselves, and you end up with the horrible, terrifying soup that is Ukraine right now. And so that is where we're going today. And I'm going to pull up my discussion on Mr. Anton. Where'd he go? Doop-de-doop-de-doo. Something's going screwy here, friends and neighbors. And I don't have my but I need to get to it. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna babble for a second because it looks like the link did not come through in the mail, which is really weird because it always does. And here it didn't come through. I mailed it here and it is not here. And I'm quite grumpy over that. So let's do it again. And this is frustrating to me, and I'm really sorry to be babbling while we're supposed to have a topic, and we do not because it didn't show up. Dagnabbit. Now I have to paraphrase what Mr. Anton told us earlier, and I don't like that. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put on a little bit of music, and I can't do that, can I? Let's see if I can put something on, or maybe JR will rescue me so I can find this, because I really need to get to this, if at all possible. Well, I'm going to have to paraphrase it, I guess, and I'll be looking it up while I talk about it. So basically, he gave a 1 hour discussion in the cloud there. And at the Eastern Economic Forum, he gave a very good delivery and an interesting speech. He was talking about the focus of Russia headed east. And there's a lot of focus, even me, on this program over the past couple of weeks on the Eastern Economic Forum, all the projects that are going on between the Southeast Asian companies and countries, and huge investment all the way across the line. All the railroads are being improved. All of the ports are being rebuilt. And the discussion is on this astronomical growth. Well, then there's an additional focus on something called multipolarity. And this multipolarity is something that nobody in the U.S. wants to really, I shouldn't say nobody, none of the leadership in the U.S. wants to acknowledge that this is what's really happening. And, but it really is happening. And this means that this multipolarity, one of the big reasons to avoid it is because of these sanctions. So these sanctions are what are the biggest bother to everyone. And I believe that these sanctions are, and this Anton was saying that follow the history. Look at the $37 trillion that the U.S. is trying to devalue the currency in crypto. So the whole plan is to do the exact same thing with the crypto markets that they did to the gold markets in the 30s and in the 70s. And so those are the things that the Eastern Economic Forum thought was going to be part of the equation. And I apologize. I finally brought up his document that I wanted to read here, starting where it begins. And so I did get to the actual quote. So sorry about the horrible ad lib there for a minute, but right now we're going to get to the actuals on this. They, meaning the U.S., are actively pressing tariffs on major trading partners, he means Europe, trying to reduce the deficit of their own trade balance, which everybody acknowledges that's what Trump's trying to do. And at the same time, they are trying to improve their own situation on their own budget deficit, and they're doing it very successfully so far. He's talking about Donald Trump. America is trying to change the rules on the market of gold and cryptocurrency right now. Notice they don't call it stablecoin. Remember that their debt is $35 trillion. In general, these are the two alternative currencies to the world market. Washington's actions in this direction clearly demonstrate one of the main American tasks. They want to solve the problem of the reducing trust in the U.S. and the dollar. Unfortunately, as it was in the 1930s and the 70s, the United States plans to solve its financial problems at the expense of the rest of the world, driving everyone into the cryptocurrency cloud. Only the U.S. version of the cryptocurrency cloud can be legitimate, as a bit of a side note, according to what the U.S. is trying to push here. Now, nobody says it's illegal for you to own crypto that isn't. It's not illegal for a U.S. citizen to own it. It's illegal to start a new one without having met the standards required in the Genius Act. So anybody that is outside of the system, in China, Russia, India, anywhere else in the world, unless and until they comply with the U.S., they can't access the market of the U.S. So what's the effort here, friends and neighbors? To replace the dollar hegemony that Trump wants to have so badly with U.S.-backed cryptocurrency. So what's the problem with this? Okay, the U.S. and everybody's going, well, wait a minute, Sam. Don't freak out yet. There's a 1-for-1 exchange rate of a dollar, of a real asset, dollar for dollar. You get a dollar for dollar. It's a real asset. But guess what the asset is? The chief asset is U.S. debt. So that's the asset. This is the joke of it all. So you force everybody into a new, because people are bailing on U.S. debt across the planet. Now, that's not true of our partners. There's been ups and downs. The only one, not the only one, but the typicals, who are definitely unloading. Japan's been unloading quite a bit. So they're I would say they are unloading. China's definitely unloading. A lot of the BRICS countries are unloading, but Europe picking it up. UK picking it up. If you agree with U.S. hegemony, you're going to increase this stuff. You're going to double down, which is what everybody's doing. So there's about 50 countries in the world, we all know who they are, that are going to, this is great. This is the next level of us funding the U.S. for the next however many years, right? This is stable coin. This isn't any of that nonsense from another country. This isn't from those brown people. That's the way I feel about it anyway. Or from those criminals in China, Russia, and India. That's not from them. This is backed by the U.S. dollar. Well, that's what people are avoiding. Okay, and I'm not saying positive. I'm saying negative because I'm a suspicious SOB, but I I don't believe I'm alone in this regard. And if you understand finance or understand economics, you understand exactly what they're trying to do. Okay, and the only way. Do you think that Donald Trump would react differently to Vladimir Putin if he really could enforce economic hardship upon him? If sanctions weren't BS right now, which they are, if sanctions worked, which they don't, if he could really force everybody. Now, you could say, no, it's going to be the same thing. Well, and unfortunately, a huge part of me thinks that way, that the only people who are going to buy into this new genius crypto are the same old people wanting the same old thing. And they're going to want to bring the rest of the world into it. But the rest of the world so far is not listening. Okay. And there's a lot of these stories about what I have going out. Okay. So Washington's actions, blah, blah, blah. They really want to solve the problem of reducing U.S. dollars trust. The U.S., as it was over time, when part of the U.S. government debt is replaced in stablecoin, the U.S. will devalue the debt. This is his direct accusation. The U.S. will devalue the debt just like they did gold, just like they did in the 70s with gold again. And in other words, they have this $35 trillion debt. They just devalue it. They drive it into the crypto cloud, devalue it, and start from scratch. This is for those who love to do crypto. The game will end very quickly within 3 to 5 years, he says. It is clear that both China and India, they are two that are not just moving to a new formation of the financial system. The world is leaving flat money and dividing into zones. And then he says, what about us? He's talking about Russia. In Russia, we are continuing to do our homework. The task of accelerating the pace of moving to the supply economy is in full swing. It is necessary to increase demand, pull up production. We talk a lot about this at the Eastern Forum. It's necessary to honestly admit how the important substitution is a bit of a loss of pace. And we're already at that stage. Today, we need a breakthrough. He's talking about Russia, both in terms of technology and organization. Let me remind you that the president, he's talking about Putin, not Trump, according to the results of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, gave a number of instructions. Namely, by October 1, the government has to develop and approve plans for structural changes in the country's economy. Structural. Meaning we need to change the structure of employment and consumption, increase quality of climate investment, increase the level of technological development, change the structure of foreign trade, increase efficiency in defense and security. And then of all the countries in the region that are ahead of us in this matter, South Korea, for example, 10,000 people. How do we put that? I don't think that translated correctly. It says have 1,000 robots. There's a robot, 10,000 robots in the country is basically what he's saying. And then for 1 in 700 people have a robot in Singapore. In China and Japan, it's 1 in 400. The shortage of personnel we have, especially in the Far East, where it's necessary to turn the outflow production to an inflow, turns everything into robotization and automation far more quickly. And so we're already changing the structure of our own foreign trade. Exporting everything cannot be the only way to develop the country with an internal market of 150 million people. China imports cars to the tune of that's a wrong. I don't think this translated properly because of what I heard him say when I listened to this was $2.4 billion worth of Chinese imports and cars come into Russia every year. But that's not what this says. China sells cars to us for $2.4 billion. And for all this, we have to change the model of trade, meaning they should make their own cars, right? And so there's plenty of this going on. And he's emphasizing, once again, that the tasks set by the president aren't to join the dollars in the to join the dollar. They're trying to strengthen the ruble and come up with different ways for it to, for them to fund and to finance and to pay for things. And they already are. And so the fact that he was talking about this framework between the other countries of Southeast Asia and Russia, so the big ones, Russia, China, India, of course, all trading between each other, they're going to do the same in crypto. But he warned everybody, watch this devaluation scheme of the United States. And there were 3 or 4 different talk shows on this, video programs, YouTube, whatever, that were talking about this specific issue. And I find it fascinating, truthfully. So let's start with that backdrop, okay? Because there are quite a few countries, several of the European economists that I listened to said the same thing. One from the point of view of this is going to be great. It'll push everybody back to the dollar and we'll be able to sanction them. Well, okay, if you're glad about that, pushing everybody back to the dollar, then great. But I think the people who have been avoiding the dollar and have been trying to create new structures outside of the dollar are probably not on that side. And now they're going to create a different crypto structure. They're going to stay with this crypto that is already there. And so I suppose the important question, because we're in America, is how does this affect America? What Americans can and cannot own? Okay. Here's a fact, an important point. The Genius Act does not ban Bitcoin, Ethereum, any of those. You can still buy, sell, and hold these. What it targets is the issuance and operation of U.S. dollar-denominated stable coins. Again, that word. But here's the catch. If you use a mainstream wallet, exchange, or payment app, those have to build the compliance in. You won't need to be banned from owning Bitcoin. You'll just find out that moving it is impossible. You can't move it into dollars. You can't off-ramp it into your bank account. It's all blocked. And yes, you go through one of the approved stablecoin routes. Okay? So sure, you can hold these other coins, but your ability to use them in real life, it's completely choked. Completely gone. You can't use them. Now, I've only played around a little bit with a Bitcoin, Ethereum, stuff like that. There are some people I know that are really into it, and I didn't understand it well enough to think that I wanted to get in. I was worried about the Sam Bankman-Fried types, but I was more concerned about, and when I look back on it, Jesus, when I was going to buy even one Bitcoin, it was like $7,000. Now it's well over 100, and it was like not quite. It had to be during COVID. I think it was during COVID or right after that I was looking at doing it, and it was 7,000, I recall. And it was fluctuating from, 6,000 to 8,000 for about 2-3 months. And, of course, I didn't do it. And I'm sure today it's like over 100, if I recall, unless it's come down substantially in there. But, of course, I didn't do it. So, sure, you can hold these, but your ability to trade them, the strategy, here's the U.S. strategy, the government anyway, regulator types. It's not outright prohibition, but strangulation through compliance, right? Sounds like we got a caller on the old line, and we're going to try this out and see what happens. Hello, fair caller. What can I do to help you today?
Just taking my call is quite enough, Sam. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to have you. How may I assist you?
Well, I think we need to assist each other, bro. I live in a country right now. We live in a country right now. The IRS says says that I owe them a certain amount of money, and they are restricting my ability to travel abroad, to leave the country, to become an expatriate, if you will, which I'm not going to, because I got kids and, you know, a granddaughter and whatnot and friends and here. But they say that because they think I owe them, you know, $45,000 or $50,000, that they're going to restrict my ability to travel abroad.
Well, I'm aware of those things, and I've fought them for other people in the past, in my prior life, and I know what you're going through, and I feel for you. What have you done to attempt to correct it, if you don't mind sharing?
No, okay, that's a good question. So what I've done is applied for a passport repeatedly, and have been declined repeatedly. I'm saying 3 times, and they say we're unable to process your passport due to a tax issue, an IRS issue. So 3 times, and that's not the big thing, you know. That's really not the big thing. At the same time, you know, we're letting millions, tens, maybe, you know, at least tens of millions of people into the country, but we won't let one guy, a regular old white guy, out. You know, a regular old white guy. That's all I am. That's all I'm ever going to be. You know, I'm not a big martyr. I'm not a big Charlie, you know. No one's ever going to hold me to the standards that so many great people have been held to over the course. I'm just an average white guy, just a jag, you know, just a guy. Mm-hmm. Yet they want to hold me in contempt for saying that I didn't give them enough money, that they're going to hold me. They're holding me.
Can I inquire further?
Yeah. Oh, please.
Well, I don't want to have you say something you're not comfortable saying. How old are you? You say you have grandchildren, so are you above retirement age?
I turned 59 years old about, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. September 8th, I turned 59.
Good man. Are they claiming that perhaps you didn't file, or that you filed and there were issues?
Oh, no. I filed. So here's the long and short of it. And you know how...
Well, you don't have to share this if you don't want to. I mean, there are people that are...
Oh, I want...
okay.
Sam.
All right.
I want to.
Okay.
And here's the reason. Because those people...
Well, just remember, I have to give you a bit of a disclaimer here, because I'm not an attorney. I don't play an attorney on TV. I don't give legal advice. If you want to get legal advice, you have to hire an attorney. And I'm
not looking for advice,
attorney.
bro.
Okay.
I've already found, you know, I've already found what I need to do. I'm just sharing with you my story.
I'm with you.
So anyway, back in the 2008, 2009, when all the, you know, stuff was going down, I got, the company that I ran was just a gymnastics club. You know, we taught kids how to do gymnastics, and we took them on trips and competed with them, you know, statewide, regionally wide, and nationwide. I never made it to the big scene internationally, but rubbed elbows with those people. And so there were four whatever clubs like I was involved with in the mid 2000s, you know, late 2008, 9, 10, that were held to a different scrutiny. And the scrutiny we were held to is because we named ourselves Liberty Gymnastics Academy. And that Lois Lerner and those people and the Barack Obamas and those hateful insurrectionists, they held us accountable to something that they didn't hold accountable to others. 97%. I was one of 3% that was held accountable. One of 3%. But long story short, Sam,
Mhm.
those leftist creeps want to kill people that are good. I'm a good guy. I'm a good guy. I've raised a good family. I never, did anything that was nefarious or bad. Just a good guy. And those are the people like Charlie Kirk. Those are the people they want to assassinate and kill. And so Charlie was killed by a bullet. I was killed by the administrative state, literally. I mean, I'm still alive and I'm still here to say it. And I've got a grandkid and I've got a family that's going to change the face of the nation, bro. So, but I'm telling you, there are enemies that want to pick us off one by one. They want to pick people like me off, and they've tried to pick people like you off, and they're going to come after JR. There's no doubt about that. They're gonna come after. No, they are going to. Mark my words. So here's what we've got to do, bruh. We've got to introduce them as the pox on society. We've got to make sure everyone, gets on board with pointing out those freaks, fags, and frickin' fairies for what they are.
You always
They're
go to
bad
those guys, and I'm okay with that. I mean, more power
They're
to
bad
you.
news, bro.
Well, I
They
happen
have
to
been-
agree, but you're extremely vocal about it, and I find it enlightening and amusing at the same time.
They're dangerous. I'm just saying. Look at the history. Look back at the history. Look what's happened over the course of a number of years. The Pfizers and those drug pushers. Heck, for goodness sake, fentanyl is.
I know. Don't get me started on that. What do you think about the one I'm telling you about right now in this Genius Act? What are your thoughts on that?
So refresh my memory a little bit.
Have
about
you been
the Genius
listening?
Act.
Have you been listening to what I've been talking about on today's show?
I have. Isn't that the Indians coming in?
No. Genius Act is the act that I'm talking about this stable coin wallet. Clearly not of interest to you. You haven't mentioned the Genius Act like 5 times tonight, and
right.
It has to do with the stable coin, the regulation of money in the United States, not through the dollars, not through gold, but through these so-called stable coins that they are regulating.
Let's jump into the middle of that. So stablecoin is just another, dog whistle for gold or for
U.S. debt. That's what it is.
Central bank digital currency. So here's what I think about U.S. debt. I think it's a giant charade, and I think we could eliminate it with one act of Congress.
I believe that's what they've done.
Eliminate the Fed, expose those governors, or whatever you want to call them. What's that guy? The head of the Fed? Jerome Powell. Too late, Jerome.
Too late, Jerome. That's what JR called it.
And then that big, fat, lying colored girl. She is a liar. She's a phony. She's a fraud.
Okay.
And so what we got.
But we don't. You can call somebody a fraud and a phony, but somebody's personal characteristics. You got to draw the line somewhere, don't you?
No.
We don't draw the line.
And here's the reason. You know what the reason is? It's the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. We can say, Jimmy Kimmel, that little leftist faggot creep, he can say anything he wants. And the more he says, the deeper he's digging himself into a hole. So I'm on the other side of that. The more I say, I can call them leftists, I can call them creeps, I can call them fags, I can call them fairies, I can call them furries, I can call them whatever they want. And the more they talk, they're just pointing out what I have to say. Because I'm telling you right now, I begged to Jesus. I asked Jesus, I'm like, Jesus, what should I do? And he said, speak your mind, Todd. Speak your mind. Speak your piece. And if you cross a line or two and you step on a toe or two, I got your back, brother. I got your six. That I begged to Jesus for what the best thing for me to do was. And he said, keep calling out the freaks, fags, and fucking fairies. That's what Jesus said to me. And until we get a handle on this, bro, we're doomed. We're doomed. If we let these leftist creeps continue to have I'm not saying that we should silence them. I'm not saying that we should kill them or put them in an institution. I'm saying let them speak loudly and clearly so they can marginalize themselves. That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And I use bad language. I use foul language, and
I use it too. Just generally not in this environment. So
not on the air.
I have no problem with that. No, it's rare, so I'm not too concerned about it.
I know you're not, and that's why I call, Sam. That's why I call. That's why I trust you. That's why I trust the venue that you guys have put together. Because you talk about a free speech sanctuary that you have, letting me on the air with you and saying all the foul things that I say. That is a free speech sanctuary, brother.
That is true.
Free speech.
I will definitely let you have your say, long as you aren't. So I don't like people attacking. I don't know. I don't really care for degrading other people. I just don't like it. And there's some people that just have absolutely nothing positive to add. And you generally have something positive to add. And I think you're entertaining. And I don't think you're wrong. Don't take that to mean. I think you put out your point of view in a creative and interesting way, and I like it. So I have no problem with you calling in and having your say.
All right. Well, with that, I will say good night, my good friend, and carry on the First Amendment.
Okay. Well, you should listen to a little bit about this because you weren't listening about the Genius Act, because otherwise you would have known what I was asking you about.
All right. Okay. Here's the honest to goodness truth. I listened to the Charlie Kirk thing all day long. Day long. You know what I found? Did you listen to any of that?
I heard a bunch of it. Yeah.
Well, so the thing that I found most profoundly was, love of Christ, generally, peaceful and vocal and strong positions, but never hate. I didn't hear anything about hate.
Do you know there was somebody who sent me a text in the middle of that, somebody that I wouldn't have expected to comment on that I've known from other spheres before and other areas of life, let's call it. And I don't, how do I want to put this? I have my own religious beliefs, but they are mine, and I don't condemn anyone else's. I don't force mine upon anyone else, and I don't believe that a particular church or a particular congregation is necessary for me to outline my beliefs and disbeliefs. And I believe that environment in a church with a group, and I'm willing to listen to what other people have to say. I don't have any problem with that. And I don't mind going on the large days of the year, sometime around Christmas, sometime around Easter, things like that. But I don't like to go when I know all the people I know a lot of the people in the congregation, and I know how they are during the week, and I don't want to be one of those people who people look at and go, that guy, what's he doing in church? You know what I mean? I don't even know if I'm putting it out correctly, but I don't need, because I think it, I know some of the people in there, and I'm going, oh, yeah, you're pretty holy in here, but I know you in business. Or you're pretty holy
Right.
here, but I know you're around there. And it's like, I'm the same whether I'm in that congregation or sitting here. I'm the exact same person. And I always felt like it's a little bit of a show in a lot of respects. Now, please don't take that to belittle church or anything like that, because that is absolutely not my intent. Everyone is entitled to their own belief structures. But by the way, so am I. And my belief structure is solid. You know, I know what I believe and I know why I believe it. And I have a belief, and I believe that's important to have your belief. But I also don't believe it's important to force it down anyone else's throat. Nor is it important to belittle anyone else's belief structure. You know what I mean?
We share that. Yes, I do. I completely know what you mean, Sam. It's like we're kindred spirits. I feel and think the same way you think. And here's some of the things I think about as I'm just going about my merry, life in this so finite existence. It's so finite. And so what we're gifted with is this opportunity to choose, to choose this, that, or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I choose not to go to Walmart because my beliefs are incongruent with their beliefs.
Yep.
We could talk at multitude. My thoughts are not to expose myself, or as much as I can, my kith and kin, to government intervention. I want to keep my footprint as low as possible. So I'm not a big feeling, F on the face of the planet. I keep myself to a very low footprint, whatever it is, carbon footprint, tax footprint, biblical footprint, or whatever it may be, Sam. Here's the thing, more than anything, is that if we are going to let our IRAs and our 401ks seduce us into a life of complacency, we get what we got coming. And what we got coming is our children in slavery.
Well, don't put those things in stable coin if what I believe and what this guy from the Eastern Economic Forum believes is true. You don't want to put them in there. That's how they destabilize the whole shooting match.
Well, here's what I say. Buy gold, buy silver. Get yourself off the grid.
That's true too, but the U.S. government 3 times in the last century has devalued gold too.
Do you think they're going to do that again, Sam?
I think this show, which was all going to be about that, and I still got several segments to go on that, outlines specifically what I think, and I do think that. I think, I hate to say it, but I believe that this Genius Act is step 1. After my research on this in the last 24 hours, I do believe that, and maybe I'm not outlining it clear enough, or people aren't understanding what I'm putting out. But I will say this: if you don't believe what I'm putting out, look into it yourself, because this Genius Act, I downloaded the entire thing today, read through all the preambles, read through all the parts of it, saw what they've done in the history of the U.S. post World War II, and when they devalued gold and took everybody's personal stores of gold and said they could keep only things in the form of coins and collectible currencies, but not bullion, couldn't keep that, took it from them, devalued gold 41%, and who bore the cost? The people that were still holding any sort of gold, and it reduced the debt. They did it again in 1973, twice. And the first time it was 15%, second time was like 11%, but both times it impacted those that were holding. And so the theory is that of what I've read today, this is what this Kobyakov was alleging in the East, and several financial experts all over YouTube over the last week or two have been putting it out since then, that what the goal, and before that, back in July is when it started, when this Genius Act took place. Because if they can regulate this alleged stable coin, and which is absolutely true, the dollar for dollar is what they are saying, but that's not anything that has to stay that way. And this dollar for dollar is also, they're calling Treasury debt a dollar for dollar exchange. They're calling that an asset. So if you could, and that's caused a pretty good prop up recently in buying short and long-term T-bills. Okay, so you buy these, they get propped up, and if you can force the rest of the world into it, we go right back to what's been going on with the U.S. financing all of its debt on the backs of its own citizens, but mainly on the backs of foreign countries who are forced into what if Donald Trump is behind it, which frankly I don't believe, but if it's what I believe it is, which check it yourself. Nobody's forced to believe me, but if you go back and you look at the history of this and what I know or I feel that Donald Trump knows. He knows that the days of U.S. hegemony and dollar hegemony are dying, and that people are no longer buying and keeping U.S. debt. How do you get them back in the stable? You get them back in the stable by creating a crypto market, and this crypto market is now regulated by the U.S. And why? Because we're the best and we're the biggest, and
Precisely.
We would never screw anybody, would we? But as soon as we have them under the fold, we sanction the hell out of them, and we do exactly what we're doing. We weaponize instead of weaponizing the dollar and the SWIFT system and the IMF and the World Bank and anything else related. We weaponize stable coin, and we do the exact same thing. So there you go.
I'd like to think that I'm one of your intelligent listeners, Sam, and I'd like to think there are a multitude of intelligent listeners out there to you, Sam, because you're hitting the nail right on the head, and so we have an opportunity now to divest ourselves from the big banks. We have an opportunity now to
Not under the Genius Act, you don't.
Well, no, that's right. I'm glad you're pointing that out. Mm-hmm. So right now, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. And they couch that Genius Act in words and in terms and in just feelings, even propaganda to make it sound a good thing. It's not a good thing, and the only way we're going to know it's a good thing is to be informed and be educated and be involved. And so, Sam, that's what you're doing for us right now, bro. Even if it's just for me, I don't know how many people are lilistening. I don't
care. I'm going to do it anyway.
I would challenge someone else to call in and say, "Hey, Sam, I'm listening, bro. I don't know exactly what it is you're talking about right now, but I am tuned in." What? And so that's what I encourage you to continue to do. And JR and Ike and then the Iron Maidens that are coming up tomorrow morning, and those people that just spend their time, Gabby Hayes, and Paulie and you and your brother and Nadine, you're spending your time. You're not getting paid. You're not getting compensated. I don't even know how the heck you travel the world, Sam. I don't know what it is.
Because I can do this from anywhere.
You could. Well, I'm saying you are doing it from anywhere, and I know. How to make your money, or you a podcast. You get. I don't know. I don't care. But to get to listen to the intelligent. I'm
gonna let you keep going. You keep calling me intelligent. I'm gonna let you keep on talking.
I'm just saying, perhaps intelligent is not the right word, Sam. Perhaps informed is. Perhaps engaged is. I'm not sure. But what I am sure of is that you and your brothers and sisters on this forum continue to spend your time to just maybe touch a mind or two. You said it yourself. You don't care who listens. I'm just telling you, I listen, Sam,
well,
and I appreciate.
I'm glad you do.
Yeah, and you're smart. You're intelligent. And for lack of a better term, you're engaged. You know, you have, and I think I am too. And I'm telling you right now that the best thing we can do, Sam, and I've never heard you talk about this very much, and I'm going to just say it and then I'll just bow out. But the best thing we can do is accept Christ into our lives right now, brother. And then he's going to give us, they're going to give us, God and Jesus are going to give us discernment to call the right shows, to think the right thoughts, and to put ourselves in positions that allow us to be influential, you know.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot.
That's what I got to say, brother. God bless you, and God bless your family, and God bless, you know, USA.
All right, sir. You have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Yep. And there he goes. I'm still with you. And I was telling a little bit about the text I got, and during the day, during the Charlie Kirk thing, and I got a text from a guy I wouldn't have expected it from. And I'm not a religious person, you know, like I was just saying to him. I have my beliefs, and I got a religiously overtoned text from somebody I didn't expect, and he said, "Are you watching this? This is incredible, and this is a big deal." And I happen to agree. And I was only listening peripherally, and I do believe that there's a tiny bit of how do I want to put it without being offensive, because I really don't want it to be, but there's a little bit of a tiny bit of opportunistic. But I can't help think that way. I'm inclined to believe that people are opportunistic, and more power to them. You know, especially in this topic, that it's a horrific act, and people need to understand what this world is becoming. And it'd be great to see some positives come out of this. And I believe today's events for the Charlie Kirk will show some of that stuff. I do want to get back to my point, though, and hopefully I can get through, and I think I can, most of what I have here. But these stable coins, stable doesn't mean what you think it means, you know, as I kind of alluded to before. The law requires issuers to hold their reserves. Like your bank has to have a certain amount of reserves. Your insurance company has to have a certain amount of reserves. If you have a life insurance company that's holding your life insurance, they got any insurance company that is providing insurance, for example, let's say, and I'm making these numbers up, don't hold me to these, but I'm just trying to tell you how the system allegedly works, right? So you have 10 customers. These customers all pay you $1,000 for $1,000 a piece for $10,000 worth of insurance, right? You have to have enough as soon as a claim is made. When a claim is made, there has to be $10,000 set aside to pay that claim in the event that anything comes up. That's the extent of your loss, right? So for every claim, you got to have this amount of money in the bank. The bank, the FDIC, requires the same, or the bank regulator, requires banks to have so much on deposit based on many, many different factors, and I don't claim to be an expert on what they are. But stable isn't what you think, because the law is going to require, this is a huge change in my opinion, that the law is now requiring issuers to hold reserves of this Bitcoin, of whatever it is you're holding. Well, not Bitcoin, because they're not subject to this yet, except during transfer, to trade it into something cash-like, or to turn it into dollars. If you want to pull it out in something else, well, fine. You know, in another country, but you do it here, you're screwed. The law requires issuers to hold them in safe assets. And guess what they list as safe assets? Cash, gold, silver, T-bills. You know, these are safe assets, T-bills, right? So they've been not so safe lately. You're talking downgrading the U.S. credit rating, which makes them not quite as safe. But if you say they're safe and you say they're stable and you force people to buy them, well, they'll become more stable because you're forcing people to buy them. Right? So let's be clear. $37 trillion in federal debt doesn't qualify as stable. I mean, maybe I need a different dictionary, but that's not stable. Treasuries are not stable in the sense of good household finances. They're stable only because there's a market and the government controls it and they control the supply. Stable here only means a stable demand to buy Washington's debt. Over the last year, I've told you at least 20 stories about Saudi Arabia not buying so much debt, China unloading debt, Japan unloading debt, anybody around, Italy unloading debt, lots of European countries unloading American debt. Well, guess who's buying it back post-July? A lot of the standard Western people are now buying it back because the U.S. has turned around and said, well, T-bills, geez, those are stable. That's real stable. I don't think it helps anything. And so what are we going to do? The argument of this Kubiakov is going to say, listen, what's going to happen is say what he already said. If we're going to drive people into the cloud and then devalue that money, just like we did gold 3 times in the last century. So wait for it. It's going to happen. That's what a lot of people are saying. Watch this. We'll put it in here. And sooner or later, probably sooner, not later, to get rid of the $37 trillion, they'll devalue. Or say, well, you know, back in that, you remember that Genius Act when we told you dollar for dollar on debt? Well, looks like it's really not worth that much. And watch what have you seen in the last year? What have you seen since there's been discussion about BRICS? What have you seen since there has been talks about against hegemony and pro-multilateralism, multipolarity? What have you seen? You've seen all kinds of central banks all over the world buying tons and tons of gold. Okay? So they're buying other assets to hitch their wagon to, you know. They don't want to hitch him to our shooting star. Our shooting star might not go as far. Well, you know, the fact is, this is a very good idea. I'm not discounting the idea. This is clever. This is some clever stuff to avoid, to get rid of debt. And you can sell it to the American people by saying, geez, we're going to put this on the backs of the rest of the world if we force people to buy the debt. The problem is you're not putting it on the backs of the rest of the world. You're putting it on, if Americans wish to buy anything related to any sort of Bitcoin, or they're going to go, well, I don't want to buy that Bitcoin. I'm not going to be able to trade it into dollars when I want it, so I better buy a stable coin. Well, guess what? You've just bought debt, U.S. debt. You're funding the U.S. debt. And if the debt is the big problem for you that it is for me, then you're not going to want to buy that, right? Because all of this is about T-bills, all of it, and about holding sanctions if somebody else comes along and says, well, geez, let's say Europe wants to stay in this, which they are. They're putting their money in it. And so now Europe's going to fund our debt. Europe is buying, they're buying T-bills again. They're throwing them in there because we need, Donald Trump knows this, so does Senate, so does everybody else, that if you can keep the debt flowing, you can keep more and more debt as it goes up to 40 and 50 trillion and the trillions never go down. Well, eventually something is going to have to happen. Our credit rating is already, talks of it being set back. And the fact is we're not as valuable as we used to be. We're still the strongest economy in the world, period. But this debt is a serious problem. And I suppose you could say serious problems require serious measures. And but I think they did this with a lot of people not not pulling the wool over people's eyes, but not truly explaining what it means. So if you believe that treasuries are stable, well, good for you. That's a that's a good deal. The design of this program ensures a permanent demand for U.S. debt. If every stable coin issuer has to hold short-term treasuries, which they do, the very act of people using a digital dollar props up the borrowing and increased borrowing of Washington. You're not just making a transaction, you're funding the U.S. debt. That's what's happening. Welcome to genius, right? And as you heard, Anton Kubiakov said, at the East, America's trying to change the rules of the market of gold and cryptocurrency. U.S. was, as it was in the 30s and 70s, solving financial problems at the expense of the world. Drive everyone into cryptocurrency cloud. Over time, when the U.S. government debt is placed in stablecoin, then the U.S. will devalue the debt. They've done it in the past. They drive it into the cloud, devalue it, start from scratch. Then the game will end very quickly. His accusation isn't very subtle, is it? It's pretty straight. Washington tokenizes treasuries into stablecoins. Everybody jumps in because they have to. And then, once enough people are locked in, they devalue it just like they did gold 3 times last century. That could mean changing redemption terms, changing the peg, not 1 to 1, 1 to 1.5, whatever. Or simply declaring that what was once $1 is now worth less. That's happened several times. Holders take the loss. Washington lightens its debt load. And who can do anything about it? Nobody. Is this too much conspiracy? I don't know, maybe. History says otherwise. Check out the 30s. Check out the 70s. The government forced America to hand over gold at one price and revalued it higher, pocketing the difference. In the 70s, Nixon closed the gold window and told foreign central banks at the same time, your dollars are no longer convertible. Then they changed and devalued it again. The pattern is clear. Change the rules when it suits Washington, just like everything else. That's how it works. 1933, Executive Order 6102 required Americans to turn in their gold to the government at $20 an ounce, approximately. In 1934, the Gold Reserve Act raised the official price of gold to $35, devaluing the dollar by about 40%. Citizens who obeyed the law lost lots of purchasing power, and Washington booked a profit. They could have sold it a year, 6 months later, could have sold it for $40 or for whatever it was, $35 instead of $20. Was trading at $20. In 1971, Nixon ended gold convertibility for foreign government. This was the famous Nixon shock. Overnight, the dollar became a flat currency backed by confidence alone. 1973, the U.S. had devalued twice more, and Bretton Woods collapsed. Both times, the U.S. exported the pain to everybody else. Americans holding gold in the 1930s, foreign governments holding dollars in the 70s. The genius of this system is that the losses are never borne by Washington. They're borne by whoever trusted the prior rules or the new rules. Don't trust the new rules. I'm telling you, that's what Kobyakov says. And he says, so when he says the U.S. is going to drive everyone into the cloud and then devalue, it's not wild speculation. He's talking about what happened in the past. The only difference is what the asset is. Instead of gold, it's so-called stable coins backed by debts, U.S. debt, right? So, but the other leg of this, even more important, at least from my point of view, is the sanctions are built into the money itself, into the alleged stable coin. I don't even want to call it that. It's offensive to me to call it a stable coin. Whoever comes up with these advertising gimmicks, it just drives me bananas. You can't say disinformation. You have to say Russian disinformation before. That word you can never disassociate from the word Russian. Now, the word coin, you can't get rid of the word stable in front of it. It's irritating. And so, but the sanctions of this it's a madness. This is crazy. Genius Act mandates sanction compliance. Okay. So all of these people have to mandate that they're acknowledge that they're under sanctions compliance. This means the Office of Foreign Asset Control doesn't have to tell your bank not to process the transaction. They can build the block into the coin itself. This is Big Brother not at the door of your bank, but inside your very wallet. Sanctions are automatic, self-executing. Friendly wallets can transact. Unfriendly wallets, not so much. That's how it works. And here's where it gets really ugly, okay? For Washington, sanctions aren't just about North Korea or Iran. They're about any country they would like it to be, and more importantly, any individual they wish to leverage, just like the caller's passport. Guess what? Well, we're real sorry about that. Your money is tied up. It's still there, but you can't access it. Sorry. You better pay attention to somebody in this regulatory scheme, because we, the bank that you bought this from, there's not a damn thing we can do about it. It'll just sit there. So it's pretty ugly, isn't it? Sanction, they sanction individual people. Build that into your money, and you have what? Geopolitics programmable. Geopolitics, if you piss me off today, well, guess what? Tomorrow, sorry about your stable coin. It's not so stable anymore. Well, it's still stable, but it's in my hands, not yours. Let's talk about who benefits from this, because when I got to thinking about this, I'm like, man, is it really this much Big Brother? I mean, seriously, let's think about this. Is this... I have a hard time believing that these people are out there scheming so deeply to kick the crap out of us. This is serious overkill for Sam Bankman-Fried, right? It's not like everybody's out there screwing you over. It's not like Bitcoin isn't just going up and up and up, and Ethereum and whatever else there are. There's plenty of them out there that have been doing very well over time. They've been doing just fine and peachy without U.S. regulation and involvement. This is opportunistic, crazy opportunistic. This is Sly Fox opportunistic. Let me jump in and regulate this. Nobody asked me to regulate this, but Sam Bankman-Fried gave me a reason. Look at all those Americans who may have lost some money because Sam Bankman-Fried's a crook. Well, you helped. You propped him up. You gave how old was he, 24 or something? You get him, oh, yeah, he knows what's going on. Why don't we give him hundreds of millions of dollars? There's a good idea. Why don't we do that? Who funded him? Who funded him? Go back and research that. You'll find it quite interesting who funded him and how. And who looked the other way repeatedly. Plenty of folks out there. And I'm not saying he's a patsy. I'm just saying it's an interesting story. And why would he only get 25 years? You take away the life savings of thousands of people and the huge cash funds that just disappear. It's not just you. There ain't no way he spent all that money himself. There ain't no way. Wasn't there a huge scandal about him giving money to all kinds of Democrats back then, and right before they targeted him, took him down? And then they all create this new law. Here's an idea. Let's create this thing. We're going to call it the Genius Act. Because we're geniuses for creating this scam. This is a great scam. Let's get in. And so all these people get in. And then what'll it do? Well, it's going to force everybody to go back to buying U.S. debt. Business as usual. Business as usual. Let's get those bankers and U.S. people, anybody who wants to buy a Bitcoin now, they're funding U.S. debt. That's probably the key you need to take. You want to buy debt? Great, buy the U.S. debt. You trust the U.S. debt? Great, but when they devalue it, you only get half your money back. Because that's what's going to happen. I don't know that I believe that or not. I really don't know. I think it's an interesting historical counterpoint. I'd prefer to trust people. Let's talk about who benefits first, okay? The congressional sponsors this bill. There are several of them. Bill Hagerty, Senator, Tim Scott, Kristen Gillibrand, Cynthia Lummis. Hagerty was the lead, okay? But the real architects are the regulators. The Fed, the FDIC, the Financial Center, and this OCC. They write the rules, they approve the issuers, and they enforce the sanctions. So issuers make money off of the float, just like holding dollars, just like holding anything else. They get to hold billions in treasuries and pocket the yield. Washington gets a guaranteed bid for its debt because you got to hold it. What else you going to hold? And a visibility tool over your transactions. They get a spy on you. It's a win-win for them. Absolutely. You get to spy on the American public, and you get to force them to pay for U.S. debt outside anything. And they get to keep, that's why this is advertised as stable, stable, stable. You know, here we are. And this is, geez, we got to regulate this thing. And could they really depeg? What do you think of that? Is that possible? Stable coins today are supposed to be worth $1 a piece, right? But pegs can and do break, right? The reserve wobbles. Redemption rules can change. Regulation steps in. The value can be adjusted. And that's what Kobyakov is saying, his scenario. It's a deliberate devaluation. It's coming, is what he said. And it's not that far-fetched. Washington rewrites monetary rules all the time, and they did twice as to devaluation of gold in the last century. And they just walked away from Bretton Woods. They walked away from all kinds of agreements. It doesn't matter. They don't have to honor those. If situations change, they don't. They just go, well, it's like a Band-Aid. Rip it off. Rip it off. Do it fast. Take it fast. And, well, sorry, people. And then you get on television and you wring your hands and you go, geez, these are tough times. Time to tighten your belts. Make it work, make America great, and then off you go. That's it. This is trust in your government. Trust in your government. So far, I'm not ready. But deliberate devaluation, it's not a crazy thought. It's not crazy. Not crazy. So let's talk about gold buying and unloading treasuries, which has happened. Central banks have been buying record amounts of gold. Countries like China have been unloading U.S. Treasury. And that isn't random. They are trying to hedge exactly against this kind of reset. If Washington is going to force everybody into digital treasury, the smart money is diversifying your assets into assets that Washington cannot devalue with a stroke of a pen. Now, if you have gold, hold on to it. Don't let anybody seize that crap. I'd put it in a hole in the bottom, and somebody said, you have any gold? I'd say, nope. Why? Because it's in a hole. I don't have it unless I'm carrying it around with me. When I have gold, come back. I don't have any right now. It is in a hole in the ground. Well, where's the hole? I ain't telling you. What do you care? I don't have it. Your question was, do I have any gold? And no, I don't. And by the way, I'm not buying any treasuries in your stable coin environment. I'm not doing it. And these central banks that are buying it, they're all Western. There aren't a lot of other people. This is not random. They are hedging against the reset. And there are more and more people like this BRICS, like this Shanghai Cooperation Organization, like this ASEAN, and all of the groups that are participated in this Eastern Economic Forum. People are talking about this. I'm talking about it, but in America, people don't talk about this. Who's going to talk about what went on in the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russia? Me. You know, and because it's an important topic over there. It's like when I watched their legal forum in St. Petersburg back several months ago, or when I watched the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, or when I would listen to Sergei Lavrov. And man, I got so many interesting stories of this. I could switch straight to another topic, and if I finish this early, I'm going to, because there's something also pretty cool. The one that I think I'll give you a quick taste of it anyway at the end of tonight's program, because it was pretty interesting. I don't know that I believe it or not, and I'm leaning toward the probably not, but it's a good conspiracy theory, and I like it. So let's talk about this Eastern Economic Forum, right? At this Eastern Economic Forum, Putin emphasized all kinds of new trade corridors, cooperation with China, and building out the Northern Sea Route. All about infrastructure and autonomy. Infrastructure, building things, steel, concrete, wiring, AI networks, gas and oil pipelines, rail lines, highways, things that make trade easier between people. What are we building in America? We spent several discussions on this in a couple of weeks ago. The people who control the infrastructure of the planet in the next 20 years will control who has access to those. The U.S. is attempting that through this stable coin and trying to be the first to regulate and create some sort of Bretton Woods type atmosphere to force everybody back into the fold of the dollar. If it's not the dollar, it's guaranteed by the dollar, but you can't guarantee it by the dollar because the dollar is weakening. But if you guarantee it with U.S. debt, obviously people don't think that's the prime asset of the world. 37 trillion in debt isn't an asset, right? That is not an asset by definition, but you get to call it an asset if you're creating yourself a stable coin, because what does that do? It forces people to buy more, which is all we really care about, because the debt is going to keep on increasing. When does it end, by the way? It only ends, everybody says this. I mean, how many stories have you seen about this over the last few years? That, well, what's wrong with America just defaulting? What's wrong with America filing bankruptcy? What's wrong with a great reset? And just telling everybody that we owe money to, well, sorry. Well, geez, you know what we better do before we do that? Let's spread it out among all the American people. Remember, each American owes whatever it is, $100,000 per American, per man, woman, and child. Well, get your share. How do you get your share? By stablecoin. Watch the U.S. devalue it. Suddenly, everybody's broke. As long as we're all broke at the same time, I suppose it's no different. But we're but that's not how it works. When they go in and devaluize the people at the top, just like before, they're all protected. They don't have to worry about that. But when you are paying your $100,000 per person because they've devalued everything, and suddenly all your money, your paycheck, everything was involved in this Bitcoin, or stable coin. I got to tell you, my trust level is extremely small, minuscule. In fact, there probably isn't any. I don't trust government as far as you could pick them up and heave them. This is the next scam. That's what it is. And so I don't know. If you want to follow, there's a couple of good English translations that are fairly accurate, as you could tell from when I was trying to read you that blurb from Mr. Kubyakov. The translation isn't all that great. Sorry, yawning. A little tired today, or tonight, I suppose, because it is about 20 to 11 at this period in history. So, at the Vladivostok Forum, Putin's emphasizing infrastructure. Money follows trade. Yes, we know that. And if BRICS and their partners, which they already are, building alternative corridors, they're going to build alternative payment systems too. And they already are. And so this Genius Act is doing some of the work for us, driving people to these other markets. And then you have doubting Samuels like me saying, well, I'm really not into that. This doesn't sound right to me. Something sounds fishy when you're funding it with U.S. debt. It is, again, especially if you get all the debt and you devalue it. So this warning from Kubyakov was to all the people participating in that is, look, don't get stuck into this. Your safe bet, don't buy anything pegged to the U.S. Genius Act structure of these different crypto coins. Stay with the crypto coins you got, or watch the ones that are funded in the Chinese system, in the Russian system, or the alternative payment systems, or all else being equal. Buy yourself some gold and keep the gold. Take your savings and put it in gold, and real gold. Not on some market somewhere that they're ultimately gonna scam out. Keep it in a hole in the ground in your somewhere. I have zero trust in what is going on. Absolutely none. And like I said, money follows trade. They're building alternative systems. Washington's stablecoin framework just doesn't invite cooperation. It's compelling your compliance. And the rest of the world is clearly preparing to say, no thanks. Maybe we should too. Because I'm telling you, this is what the rest of the world is preaching. At the end of the day, this Genius Act isn't remotely about making money more convenient or safer. It's about locking the world into a system that Washington controls. We've seen this move before. In the 30s when they changed the rules on gold, in the 70s when they closed the gold window for participating countries, and now here they are in the 2020s. They're going to do it again with these digital currencies tied to U.S. debt and forcing you to get in there. Well, if you wish to be part of the modern world in crypto. And if you're not paying attention, you'll be the one left holding the bag, because Washington's playbook has been run many times before. Stability doesn't mean security. It means you can't get out. You can't depart. You get into the system, you're not getting out. And so there's a lot of people hedging their bets by staying out. Yes? So, crazy, crazy stuff. Let's talk about, well, I wanted to get some of the more of what it actually said, but there was one other part, what it meant for the Americans. Let's see. Which story do you buy in all of this? Seriously. Vladivostok headlines weren't Bitcoin, trading corridors, infrastructure, Arctic routes, Chinese links, money rails following trade rails. And then which story are you going to buy? Okay, there's I suppose you could take 3 points of view, right? First one is, well, this is government story, right? Here's how the government's going to sell this to you. Well, we learned from FTX, and Sam Bankman-Fried, we're protecting consumers. Well, this is what we're doing. We are protecting you. This is all protection for you. Big Bad Brother is gonna make sure that you can't lose any money by these unscrupulous actors like FTX. We're gonna insure your money by the FDIC. We're going to force you to comply with the Fed. We're going to make sure that banks must use this system if they're going to sell anything like this. But we're protecting you, right? This is good stuff. This is the Sam Bankman-Fried hammer. These are checks and balances to take care of people like that. That's story number one. Do you believe that? Not so much. I don't believe that. They didn't do this to protect anybody from anything. They did this for something else. So it's got to be one of these other two. Let's see. B. No, the second choice. This is sanctions first money, right? Genius embeds sanctions at the issuer layer. Maybe this is being done to enforce, get people into this system and then enforce them because people have to comply. They have to get in. A lot of people are, saying no, thank you. But if, let's say, somebody that doesn't want to impose sanctions against Russia, somebody doesn't want to. Who doesn't want to impose sanctions against Russia? Let's say that, is it Hungary? I think it's Hungary that is buying and selling and oil and not doing sanctions. And so far, or was it Slovakia? I don't remember, but it doesn't matter. Pick one. That these people who are part of the European community, they decide to buy into this new Genius Act stable coin scenario and buy their share of U.S. debt. And somewhere in there, they have trade with Russia. Well, if you don't sanction Russia, you become sanctioned yourself. Blocked. All blocked. Nothing for you, and no soup for you, and then off you go. That's it. That's option number two. This is done to control sanctions. Or C, or third one, this is debt engineering. This is done for debt purposes. A backdoor to devalue later. Kobyakov's exact, explicit accusation with history as a backdrop. I suppose I could leave you choose to that. My read, it's probably B, a little bit, C, absolutely, with A as the probable sales pitch. This is just the sales pitch. Let's see if there's a couple of questions that I thought of when I was like, can I still hold Bitcoin and Ethereum? Yes, but the choke points are going to be at issuance. If you already own it, you can keep it. If you want to get rid of it and get dollars, that could be a bit of a problem. Could they really depeg the dollar? That's possible. The Bank of International Settlement says par promises conflict with profits. They can change it. They can change the par, no problem. Kobyakov said it's intentional. They're going to devalue. That is the plan. And then, most importantly, find out who is pushing this nonsense. The sponsors of the above. Think about it. I mean, you know who the biggest sponsor is? The Fed, FDIC, NCUA, FinCEN, and OFAC, Office of Foreign Controlled Currency or something like that. They write and enforce these things. And the major firms that lobbied for this, all financial, all gave millions to the sponsors in their last debates, according to whatever. There's several places where you can research where they get the money. I don't know. I'm old school. Money shouldn't be a policy switch. Money should be money, and you should be able to rely on it. But it's happened twice. Well, actually 3 times, but twice under the same president in the 70s. And if you're not paying attention, you're you're going to be left. Sponsors, check out Hagerty, Scott, Gillibrand, Loomis. Where's their top industry money come from? Securities and investment. Largest lifetime buckets to Hagerty. 2024 cycle. Gillibrand was in the top 10 of the same organization. Tim Scott got $1 million from him in the 2024 cycle. Loomis, his largest sector is finance, insurance, and real estate, where he gets his money. Pack Muscle, that has been back in this, come as a pack called Fair Shake. 116 million, 141 million cash on hand, and donors include Coinbase, A16Z, Ripple, and Jump. All platforms, right? Corporate lobbying, Coinbase disclosed $970K for lobbying. Explicitly listed in Senate Bill 394 per Genius. That's the Genius Act. And I don't know. I am not so hopeful that this is done on the up and up, friends and neighbors. So I tell you what, if you want to go check out some of the watch history, this because it has English subtitles on the bottom. There's one called Russia just, how did it go? Accused the U.S. of using crypto to wipe out its debt. There's a channel called ITM Trading. That girl's pretty interesting. She says Russia exposes U.S. plot to dump $37 trillion debt. Lavrov was at a round table discussing the same thing. Plenty of places to go and find English-speaking stories on this if you wish to find some more. I'm going to give you a taste of where I think I'm going to go tomorrow, because remember when I started this show earlier, I was telling you that I wanted to talk about this story. And I found it quite interesting. I remember when Chernobyl went off, okay, when Chernobyl was a big deal, and they were worried about radioactive particles contaminating the United States and other places, depending on how big this was. And it's always been a bit of a I'm not even sure how to put it, conspiracy theory thing for me. Well, there's a story that I heard the other day, and it's a 2-hour, and I listened to about an hour and a half of it. I still got the last half hour to go on Chernobyl, and there's a conspiracy theory related to it, okay? And the people who put this out, I've done a decent amount of research on this as well to find out where this conspiracy theory goes. And so there's so much information on this. It's like the X-Files, right? It's here you go. Let's check it out. Return to April 1986. Not to the morality play, operator error, graphite tips, but to the file that didn't make it in the archives. This one says that the explosion at Chernobyl wasn't the end, it was actually a seal. And what were they sealing? 2 theories. One, a portal. A portal to where, you might ask? Well, that's where it comes out. They call it, and this is pretty conspiracy theory, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of chatter about it, and I've never heard it before. And I don't know how it ended up in my feed, but I started watching because, I remember Chernobyl. I remember thinking I was in the military at the time, and I thought it was a big deal. And, well, it was. And but they call it Object CH2, basically. And then they were talking about a black mark in a room that became a rumor, this room 217, and a sentence decoded, allegedly, on a BESM-6 mainframe computer, and a signal captured after the blast, which said, according to them, this is 40 revolutions of your star, and we will return. Be ready, children of the earth. Okay, now there's a lot of talk about this. 40 revolutions from 1986 turns out to be what? 2026. So on April 24th, the day before, they alleged that a man named Voryabyov, who was healthy, calm, checks in at the old square in Moscow. 2 days later, a strange kit arrives at the nuclear power plant. Equipment, even the operators weren't allowed to question or see, was routed toward a service corridor above room 217. Brand new guards, brand new badges, brand new seals on doors nobody had keys for, and a map that marks circles in the pine forest around it like somebody is hanging a halo over the town called Pripyat. So, which is right nearby. It's where a lot of the nuclear people live. Now, people were wondering back, why in the world would you build a nuclear power plant here? It was a swamp, first of all, and it was a pretty cool place to build, but why would you build it over a swamp? Well, allegedly, there were radioactive portions on that area before Chernobyl ever came up, and there are allegedly tunnels underneath it that are no part of any sort of nuclear power plant. That's the story that I was going to get into. And it was an interesting hour and a half, I'll tell you that. The first reports after the blast are pretty thin. They say there's an incident, there's a fire, measures are being taken, and then silence because nothing is happening, because everything is a closed session, a note in the minutes. A member of the Politburo asked, what is the CH2 object? And everybody's, the CH2 is under control. Under control? What matters isn't just the reactor above, but what's beneath it all. A concrete throat, a silver rod, deep grounding, and a target that no physicist will admit on paper. They were talking about people having passed away years and years later. There are diaries of people who were there that passed them on to their sons. Their deathbed admissions that they say, listen, we were covering up something else there. And it was a pretty interesting story, all very X-Files. And I think I'm going to give you some of that tomorrow night, but we're coming up near the end of the show. We'll see if I can give you a couple more minutes of it. So this Black Mark protocol reads like it was written by a man who sleeps well after signing all kinds of death warrants. It says, the perimeter is set according to the protocol Black Mark. Chemical defense troops are ready. If the impulse exceeds the limit, press AZ5. We all know what happened next. AZ5 was pressed, and instead of calm, there was an explosion. Not that kind that ends the experiment, but if you believe the linemen whisper later, the kind that sealed the portal. An order clipped and bored in the way only bureaucrats can be when they're filing the apocalypse. The portal is closed. The threat is eliminated. It is now necessary to prepare for the Omega variant. Omega, the last letter. The last plan. Pretty curious, isn't it? If you follow the men who came out the night before and walked past the badges and the bribes, they all lead to one door, room 217, an armored door with a code nobody had. The log that says Moscow specialists spent several hours a day in room 217, but after the blast, when the world is an ass in glass and sirens, they come again. And this is when the accounts begin to fail because room 217 is empty. The walls remain, the floors and ceilings are intact, but inside there is absolutely nothing. Not the kind of nothing you get when a space is gutted, but a different kind of nothing. A duty operator, an old and stubborn man, says he heard it on a handset that wasn't connected. 3:17 a.m. The tape recorder agrees. It's in the log. Message received. And then the sentence no one can explain. 40 revolutions of your star, and we will return. So be ready. Isn't that crazy? I want to go a little bit more into that. But that, sadly, friends and neighbors, is going to have to wait until tomorrow. I very much appreciate you joining me for this evening's festivities on International Flavor, and at damradio.com/live. You can catch me here every Sunday night through Thursday night from 9 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Chicago time, Central Standard Time in the U.S. But on Sundays, I usually go 2 hours, go a little bit longer. I also take all of my shows and upload them to internationalflavor.com. You can always listen to all the great talk show hosts on damradio.com/live, and you can listen to our podcasts as stored on damradio.com/podcast. You can find the schedule, damradio.com/schedule. I hope you join us tomorrow night as well. I will be here. Until that time, you have a very good night.